In today's video we're going to be talking about your top 12 problems with Leica cameras, and then I'll add 3 of my own at the end. Hey guys, Matt here from MrLeica.com. So I did a poll a while ago, what are your biggest problems or difficulties when it comes to Leica cameras? And I've done a detailed blog post, so I can link that below if you want to go through anything in more detail. When people say Leica cameras, I think most people are thinking of Leica M cameras, so most of these problems are going to relate to rangefinder cameras, but not all. So problem number 1, this affects all Leica cameras, and any guesses? The biggest problem with Leica cameras is the cost. Leica cameras are not cheap, so that is the biggest barrier to many people, the barrier to entry. But the barrier of entry doesn't need to be as expensive as many of you may think. Yes, brand new Leica M11s are expensive, but you can get older cameras which are a bit more affordable. Obviously affordable is different for all of us, but for me, for example, I use the older Leica SL, absolutely love it. Probably about the same price as a Sony camera. If you want cheap film cameras, you could get the Leica R series cameras. They can be picked up really cheap. And then you can also use Leica 3 cameras. They're a lot cheaper than, say, a £2,500 M6, used M6, not the new M6. Problem number 2, getting the correct exposure when taking your photograph. That seems to be something that people really struggle with. When I meter with my cameras, obviously old cameras like this don't have meters, but if I was using, say, the little clip-on meter that goes on the top, or let's say it was an M6 and it's got a built-in meter, I'll fill the viewfinder with the skin of the person. So let's say I'm taking like a half body photo. I'll walk in close enough so the viewfinder is filled by the skin here, and then that means it doesn't matter how backlit they are, I'm exposing for the skin here. If you go back and so half of your frame is the person and half of the frame is the background, sometimes it confuses the camera and you're going to get the wrong meter reading. So by always filling your frame with the thing you want to get the correct exposure for, I get the correct exposure most of the time, and that works really well for me. Problem number 3, hold it, yeah, looking good. Yeah, wait, stay there. Okay, 1, 2, 3, forgetting to take your lens cap off your Leica rangefinder camera, especially when shooting film, because you can easily shoot a whole roll, and then if you're a newbie to Leica cameras, because you're looking through the viewfinder window here and not through the lens like on an SLR camera, you can see your photo, but the lens cap's still on. So obviously a fun one, but I'm sure it's caught many people out during their time with their Leica cameras. Let us know below if that's ever caught you out. Problem number 4, this was getting your horizon straight when taking your picture. Now I can't quite understand this one personally, because even if I'm using a camera such as an old Leica M3, which doesn't have grids or horizon leveling devices and all the fancy stuff you get with digital cameras, all I do is look through the viewfinder. I'm just lining up the top of the viewfinder with, say, a line on the horizon behind you guys, or if I'm doing vertical shots, I'll line up the side with the side of a building, and you pretty much always get correctly aligned photos. Before you take your picture, just stop for a second, take your focus away from the thing in the foreground and just check your background and just check your composition and just level it up a bit and then take your picture. Okay, problem number 5, I think we're on. Loading film into Leica cameras. So I've got some Kodak Pro Image here. If you're loading a Leica M camera, it's pretty straightforward. Take the bottom plate off, open the back, put your leader on the right hand side, drag it across, clip it up, make sure it's flat, drop the back down, bottom plate on, advance, you're ready to go. If you're shooting with older cameras, such as Leica 3 cameras, you do need to remember to obviously cut a longer leader, but you only need to do that a couple of times and it's second nature, so don't let that stop you. I just want to quickly interrupt the video to say a huge thanks to my awesome patrons. Patreon is my teaching platform. To learn more, link below. Let's get back to the video. Nice. Problem number 6, rangefinder focusing, and it's where you have to overlay your image before taking a picture. So if you're, the way I do it, if you've got a faint rangefinder patch, just look for like a straight line, such as this picture behind me, or the vertical, line up the 2 lines on that painting, and then you know you're sharp to take your picture. And when I'm photographing models, I'll just line up the side of their pupil of the nearest eye. Correct me in the comments below, but I do believe that rangefinder focusing is actually more accurate than using, say, an SLR camera through the lens. I find it much easier to hit focus with a 51.4 lens on a rangefinder camera than I do on a SLR camera. I love rangefinder cameras, but the biggest problem that you may get with older Leica cameras is at some point they've probably had a bit of a knock or a drop or a ding, and so the rangefinder patches don't align. So when you set your lens to infinity, looking at as far as you can see, if the patches don't align, your camera needs recalibrating. This is the biggest problem with rangefinder cameras, the fact that you have to keep recalibrating them. So if you bought a camera and your photos are not in focus, this is going to be the most likely problem. Your problem number 7 is struggling to scale focus. So let me just show you. On the top of the camera, you can see the small numbers and these lines here, and that gives you your band of focus at any given f-stop. This is a 50mm lens, so the bands are quite narrow, but let's say we're shooting at f11, where my fingers are trying to point to. You look at the corresponding numbers which are opposite the lines. At f11, it's going to be from 1 meter to 1.3 meters. It's obviously not a huge amount in focus because it's a 50mm lens. On a wider lens, you could set your distance to say 3 meters, and everything from 1.5 meters to say 5 meters might be in focus. So less useful with 50mm lenses, but if you're using a wider lens, it's really good, especially for things like street photography. Problem number 8, struggling to see with your Leica camera. Now, if like me, you need glasses, older Leica cameras have built-in diopters on the Leica 3 cameras, as you can see here, and on some of the Leica R cameras. And then if you're using Leica M cameras, they don't have built-in diopters, but you can get diopter screw-in attachments, and you can also get 1.25 viewfinder magnifiers and 1.4 viewfinder magnifiers. Another way to make it easier for yourself is just to get a Leica camera with a higher magnification viewfinder rangefinder. So if you saw my recent video on the most accurate rangefinder cameras, get yourself a Leica M3. That was the best of the bunch for Leica cameras. If you're shooting digital Leica M cameras, you can then use things like the EVF or VisoFlex if your camera has the live view option. So not the M8, not the M9, and then you can look through your EVF, magnify your view, critical focus, take your shot. Have you ever seen photographers where they're doing this when they're taking their pictures? This is because they're using the center point focus and then they're recomposing, then taking their shot. Your problem number 9 was being able to get sharp focus with your Leica camera when you have to do the 2-step process of focus first, then recompose. I think the problem I've seen when I do my workshops is sometimes people move quite a lot between focusing and recomposing. They'll be focusing and then they'll be moving like this, forwards and backwards quite dramatically before they take their picture. So when you focus, I try to explain it like if your camera is on a pivot, don't move your camera from this pivot, so it can rotate left and right and it can go a little bit front and back, but don't shift the camera forwards and backwards dramatically because then you will miss focus. Try to only move a tiny bit. You only really need to do that to do everything you need to do. Yep, you're looking really good. Yeah, I've got you right in the center of the frame here. Yeah. Problem number 10, parallax error. So with cameras like the Leica 2F I've got here, when I get close to my subject, as I'm looking at you guys now, what I see through the viewfinder is different to the framing of what I'm going to get in the final image because the viewfinder is above the lens. So at this distance of say 1 meter, the camera say show me this, but it's going to take a photo like here below. You need to tilt down just a tiny bit before you take your shot. Tilt towards the lens, which means horizontally tilt down. If you're doing portrait orientation, tilt towards the lens like that. The biggest problem for me is actually remember to do the parallax correction because many cameras don't need it. Like M cameras don't need any correction. It's only the Leica 3 cameras from the Leica range where you'll need to micro adjust before taking your shot. If you're shooting at infinity, the camera's going to give you the inaccurate framing. Even mid-distance, you shouldn't have any difficulties or problems. And wide lenses, again, you won't really have any problems. Problem number 11 is limited telephoto lens options for Leica cameras. This only affects rangefinder cameras. So if you shoot with, say, Leica R cameras, there are 200mm lenses available and longer. If you shoot with the SL cameras, again, longer lenses are available. It's only really a problem with the Leica M cameras and Leica screw mount cameras. They only made lenses as long as 135mm. I've stated the obvious, but this is only a problem if you shoot film. If you shoot digital, the sky's the limit when it comes to adapting lenses. Finally, your biggest problem, and problem number 12, is photo inspiration and actually being inspired to take pictures with your amazing Leica cameras. I have already done a video on photo inspiration, 23 tips to hopefully inspire you to get out taking more pictures, so I can perhaps link that at the end of this video. Now, before we finish, I want to include 3 more big problems that I find are a big limitation when it comes to taking photos with my Leica cameras. My additional problem number 1 is the limited focus distance. On a Leica 3 camera, you have a minimum close focus distance of 1 meter. On a Leica M camera, you have a minimum close focus distance of 0.7 meters. On all of them except, I think, the M3. The M3 is 1 meter. However, you can ask your Leica repair guy to just recalibrate your M3 so it's 0.7 meters. Both of my M3s focus to 0.7 meters, and it's not a destructive change. It's not going to devalue your M3, and then it makes it even more amazing, and that's why the Leica M3 is king. If you're used to SLR cameras, you can shoot as close as like 0.25 meters or something crazy on some of the wider lenses, and it really does kind of get in the way of taking some of the intimate kind of detail photos with a Leica camera. You just can't do those detailed shots. There are some adapters that you can get for both the Leica screw mount cameras and the Leica M cameras that allow certain lenses to focus closer. I have done a video on close focus adapters, so yeah, check that out if you want to know more details on the various close focus adapters. My problem number 2 is a 3-part problem, and all based on the same one problem. So the problem with rangefinder cameras, this is M cameras and Leica 3 cameras, you're not focusing through the lens. As we know, we're focusing through the rangefinder. This has got 3 practical problems that frustrate me. Problem number 1, if you're using vintage lenses that flare very easily, if you're using a digital Leica M camera, shooting at the sun with, say, a backlit model, as I often do, because you're not seeing real time the effect of the flare on your final image, you can't micro adjust to get more flare or less flare for like a creative shot. So not being able to see the final image I find really frustrating when using rangefinder cameras. Problem 2B, if you want to do like shoot through shots where you've got foreground blur, then your subject, then your out of focus background. If you're trying to shoot through leaves, you might have a leaf here, and I'm looking at you, I'm looking through the viewfinder, I can see that my nice model, and there's a big leaf here. And I take the picture, and because I can see the model, I think everything's okay, but there's something obstructing my view, it's obstructing the lens. So not being able to see through the lens, again, makes rangefinder cameras really rubbish for these shoot-through arty type shots. One way around it, if you're shooting with models, is ask the model, hey model, can you see the front of this lens? If they say yes, if they can see me, I can see them. If you're shooting something that doesn't talk, it's not quite so easy. And part 3 of the part 2 problem, if I'm shooting, say, a backlit model and they're on a cliff top on a windy day and the sun is in and out of the clouds constantly, the camera meter isn't accurate enough to put the camera in auto mode, so I will shoot in manual mode, and then because the light is going in, out, I have to keep stopping, chimping, changing the exposure, take another shot, change the exposure again, take another shot. If you're seeing in real time the change through the viewfinder in the exposure, you can quickly micro adjust, one a little bit brighter, a little bit darker, a little bit brighter, a little bit darker. And in those types of scenarios, you can't have a camera like a M camera not showing you the correct exposure, because it's just it just gets in the way of taking your pictures. The Leica SL camera will fix all of those problems that you would have with the Leica M digital camera. And my problem number 3, slightly linked to one of the earlier points, is the fragility of rangefinder cameras. So if you want to go traveling and take one camera around the world, when you're backpacking or whatever, you need a camera that's going to keep working. And I would argue that a much cheaper camera such as a Nikon FM2 is much more robust than a Leica camera. If you give a Leica camera a sudden knock or heavy vibration, or you drop it, You then need to recalibrate your own camera if you're out in the field, or you need to send it to a Leica technician for them to do it. And if that happens, if you've got to send your camera off, you're going to be without a camera for a prolonged period. Talking over robust cameras, as you can see, I've rented a bike, and so I wanted to do a bit of exploring. So I needed a vibration-proof camera which was going to work and not be affected. For that reason, I brought a little Nikon camera as well as Leica cameras. If you want to learn more about affordable Nikon cameras, I can link a video to some Nikon cameras next.